That's an important official way of syncing audio. It's why they use the clapper. Okay, I'm gonna do stuff now. How's it going, everybody? So today I'm gonna show you guys my 3 favorite tools for blending a tracked sky with a foreground. So we use our tracker like the move, shoot, move to photograph the sky. This helps us to get a lot more data in a really high quality image of the night sky. Then we turn our tracker off. It's amazing how they call me when I'm recording a video every time. Anyways, I do apologize about that. So yes, we use our tracker to record a really nice image of the sky, turn the tracker off, and get a nice long exposure of the foreground. This lets us to get a lower noise image for both the sky and the foreground, and then we can blend them together to create the highest quality nightscape possible. So the hard part is when we go to blend those images together in Photoshop, it can turn into a nightmare. But I have suffered through this nightmare enough times where I have a couple of tricks to help figure this out. So before I actually get into my methods for blending the sky, I do have to kind of say that these are my methods. They're not exactly the best, the most refined, the most technical in Photoshop. So what we're going to be doing today, it should be pretty easy to follow along. If you have a good idea about how layer masks work, about like black conceals, white reveals, you should be able to follow along with this pretty easily. I'm not going to get into too deep of stuff into like channels or into luminosity masks or any of that. Those tools have a really good place in a Photoshop workflow, but for this I'm going to keep it pretty basic, and I'm just going to be using the tools that are found on like your standard Photoshop. No additional plugins, no weird stuff like that. So let's jump into it. This first image here is a long exposure I shot in Canyonlands National Park. I had my very brave wife drive up this switchback road in our Jeep with our headlights on, and I was able to capture her entire trip all the way up. So this was like a 4 or 5 minute exposure, and you can see by the star trails here that it was definitely for a long time. So after she did that, I turned my tracker on, pointed my camera towards the sky, and was able to capture this image. You can tell that it's a really natural alignment. If you look right here, see that little notch in the foreground that's all blurry? Well, that notch is this notch right there. So it's a pretty accurate, pretty authentic orientation for the sky and the foreground. So what we need to do is delete this sky with the star trails and replace it with this one. So we have to, first of all, kind of use our imagination to see what shape the final image will be. Since I shot both of these horizontally, and I'm going to be stacking them on top of each other, the final image is going to be a vertical shot that's kind of like too tall. So the first thing I'm going to do is expand my canvas by using the crop tool right here. I'm going to make sure that there's no ratio or anything there, so we're just doing it freestyle. And I'm going to drag this up and kind of guess at about how high my final image is going to be. And it's okay if I go a little bit too far with that, because we'll be able to crop it once we're done. So now I need to delete this little bit of this sky right here. For this first section, I'm going to be using the quick selection tool here in Photoshop. And this quick selection tool is probably the easiest way of deleting the sky. It has its limitations, but I like to use it when I have a really nice, clean horizon like this. We can see that there's no big trees with complicated branches, and it's all really dark. There's no snow-capped mountains or anything like that. So it's a point of really high contrast that Photoshop will be able to recognize easily. So choosing our quick selection tool, I'm just going to click and drag along the horizon, and you can see how well Photoshop is grabbing that horizon. And if we zoom in, you can forgive all my hot pixels that I have to get rid of later, but this is a pretty good, it does a pretty good job of grabbing even along these kind of complicated trees and bushes and stuff. Now, you can get really picky and really refine this edge and try to get it like up into that little tree and get into that one. I don't really worry about it. I think that just doing this is a pretty good, acceptable quality. One that I do want to adjust is right here. I want to add that little bit of sky there. So choosing my quick selection tool, I'm using my bracket keys to adjust the size of the selection, and I'm just going to click in there. You can see that it dropped down into that. Now this is a super simple and super easy foreground to mess with, but let's just imagine that I got a little bit too crazy and it went down and grabbed more foreground than it really should have. Then really simply I can use my Option key on my Mac here. See how that little symbol in the middle turns from a plus with the Option key not hit? I'm holding the Option key, it turns to a minus. So this will be used to deselect any section that I run this over. So I can just run it around like that and let go, and it does select that border pretty well automatically. So I am calling this good. And now to delete the sky, I simply use the eraser tool right here. I'm going to increase the size, make sure our opacity and our flow are all at 100%, and I'm going to delete that. Now I'm going to hit Command D to deselect everything, and we can see that there's a little bit of a line going through right there where that selection was made. So I will grab my eraser tool, no, that's my clone stamp tool, my eraser tool, and go right over that. Now we can fit on screen, so we see we have this really nice foreground with our sky deleted with all those checker boxes. So now coming over to our sky, we simply go to the Layers tab, click the layer, drag it up, and drop it into place. Now we can drag the sky layer below the foreground layer, and then use this move tool to reposition the sky. So we want to line it up there, and then we're just going to drag it behind our foreground here. And it seems like there's a little bit extra sky, or a little bit more foreground in our sky image than we can really hide easily, because I want to show more of that Milky Way. So I'm going to adjust the shape of our sky image by hitting Command T, which brings up our transform tool. Then up here, we can warp our transform box. Then we can click and drag and pull around on the image just to kind of change the shape of it a little bit. You want to be careful with this, because if you go too far, you can really, distort your stuff really bad. But you can just hit Command Z if you make any mistakes like that. Click our checkbox, and it's just still on the move tool. So now we can drag that down, right to there. And it's blended really nicely for us. Now we can use our crop tool and delete all of this blank space above it. And there we go. So that's how I use the quick selection tool to delete the sky and to replace it with a new sky. Now you can get more in depth and add like some layers of haze on the horizon to try to break up how strong of a border that is. With like a gradient filter, you can kind of brush some haze into your image. But this was shot really far from light pollution, and there was no natural haze on that horizon. So I'm happy with how this looks, and that is how you use the quick selection tool. The next method we're going to be using, if we come over to this image here, is the amazing sky replacement tool that Photoshop has given us. So this is a nice long exposure of this foreground shot on my Olympus with a 17mm lens. And if I go into Lightroom, this is the track sky that I shot just above it. So we're going to be using the sky replacement filter, and I again like it when there's a really strong, harsh border, but it also does a pretty good job with trees too. I'm going to show you a trick in a few minutes to help out with trees. So in order to use the sky replacement tool, you need to create the sky that you want to put into your image. So for this one, I stacked these 3 images here and blended them together and made this final image here. So you have to save this image somewhere on your desktop that you can easily find it. I'm going to do this in Lightroom by just going to Export, and here I have selected a specific folder, and then on my hard drive, which I've labeled blue, I have this folder called My Skies. So I'm going to export it to there. Don't resize it, don't sharpen it, don't do anything like that. You can rename it if you would like to. So I've renamed this one already to Olympus 17mm Milky Way. So I already did this, but you would hit export here, and then in Photoshop, you'll be able to find that sky super easily. Now, how to use the sky replacement. Again, I'm shooting 2 horizontal images, so I'm going to use the crop tool to expand the canvas like I did before. Now, one thing that's different is that if you just try to replace this sky, Photoshop will only replace this little bit of it for you that was in the original image. It won't do anything for the larger part where there's no data here. So we need to fill this data. The easiest way I've found to do that is to grab our little box selection tool and go just below the natural image, and then drag this all the way to the top. So we've selected this blank area. Now we're going to fill it by going to Edit, down to Content Aware Fill. This brings up our content aware box where we can use our brush and select the sky here that we want Photoshop to replicate up above. And it looks like it did a nice job of just filling it with kind of random sky there, so we can hit OK. And now it's done with that. So we still have this box selected, so I'm going to hit Command D to deselect it. We have our 2 layers over on our panel here. We want to merge those. So holding Shift, clicking both of them, right clicking, going to Merge Layers. Now this is just one image with this big giant random sky, and Photoshop should do a good job with replacing it. Now I should have done this before, but we do want to keep it kind of a normal shape, so I'm actually going to choose a ratio. I'm going to go to 2:3 and drag this all the way to the bottom, so it will just fill that space there. So now we have our random sky that we want replaced, so we can go to Edit, into Sky Replacement. Now in this box, at the top we have this drop down section where we can choose our sky, and it's automatically choosing the last one I did, but I want to add that 35mm sky, or that, I guess it's a 1735 equivalent, you know what I'm saying. So I'm gonna hit this plus box right here, navigate to My Skies, like I showed you in Lightroom, choose that and hit Open. Now it gives me my sky replaced right there. So under these options, there's the shift edge and the fade edge. I usually leave the fade edge at 100 and the shift edge at 0, but this can be played around with if you want to do like a sunset or something different like that. But if we move our fade edge down, we can see that it's giving us this little bit of kind of natural looking haze right on the horizon. Move it down and it totally gets rid of that haze. So however you want to do this, whatever looks best, if you like no haze and that harsh horizon, or fade it and have that softer horizon, I think that looks a little bit more natural because especially in this location on Loveland Pass, I was shooting towards Denver. So there will be a little bit of natural haze there. The shift edge, if we bring it all the way down, we can see that this will move the edge up into the sky that we're replacing. I don't really like doing that because if you look closely, you can see all of these little star trails and that would just be super distracting. And if we move it down, it's starting to get into our mountain. So we're gonna leave that right at 0 and that'll do a nice job for us. And this scale slider can be used to adjust the size of the sky, but I don't really wanna do that. I wanna keep things really natural. So I'm gonna not adjust that at all. So I like the way that looks. I'm gonna hit OK. And now we see that it's given us these 4 different layers. So this top one is our sky. This bottom one is a layer that is kind of trying to make the blend a little bit more natural. So we can hit Option and click on our mask for this layer and see really what it's doing. Sometimes it looks good, sometimes it doesn't. One thing I notice is it tends to darken your horizon. So I'm choosing to go without using this, but every image is different and you kind of have to figure that one out case by case. This next layer here is Photoshop trying to guess at how to naturally blend the exposure of the sky with the exposure of the foreground. So turning this layer on, you can see that they darkened it up a little bit, and I don't care for that either. I like how bright I had it before. Photoshop does a good job at guessing this, but thankfully they give you these layers so you can have a lot of control. So I like how that looks. There's our original image and it dropped the sky right in there for us. We can zoom in and look at the horizon to see how good it did. And in this case, it did pretty much a perfect job. Now we do start to see a couple of these star trails here. So it would be good to modify what Photoshop did for us a little bit. So I'm going to click on the mask, click white and click on my brush. I'm going to make a really large brush with almost no hardness to it and just going to lightly paint over what Photoshop did, and we're going to refine that edge a little bit here. So it looks like it did a nice job, cleaned up that sky, and now we have a nicely blended sky with our foreground. So that is how I use the sky replacement tool. Up next is going to be a trick that I use for deleting trees out, or deleting the sky when we have like complicated trees in our image. So this is an example of very complicated trees, but we don't have to be afraid of it. When they are this dark and our sky is that bright, there's a super easy way of doing this. So this is an image I shot out near Leadville, Colorado, and I wanted to blend it with this image that I shot of the kind of winter end of the Milky Way with Andromeda right there and a couple pretty nebula thingies. If you know what those nebula thingies are, you can let me know. So I am going to use a color selection tool to select the trees and then make a mask from there. So here, making sure that our layer isn't locked or anything, we can go up to select and go to color range. And here we can choose either highlights, midtones, or shadows, or any of these colors. Or we can use this dropper tool to select what we want, but I'm going with shadows because those trees are so dark. On these sliders, we can adjust the fuzziness of it. We can see as we make it higher, it's turning a lot more of our screen white, but we want a really high contrast, like even there's no good because some of the sky is still white. So we want a white foreground with a black sky. Now if we go too far, we can see that some of these black spots are starting to show up. It's a balancing act the entire time. Then we can play with our range also to really get this honed in. If we go all the way down, we can see that there's some data in these seemingly super dark trees. We don't want any of that. We want just black and white. And I think right about there looks good. So now I've selected all of these dark areas, and from this I can click down over here and create a layer mask with it, and voila, look at that. It just deleted everything right here. Now there's a couple of things that I didn't want deleted, like for example down here, I think that's a little bit of my car. So again, I can use my brush, click black, and I'm gonna make some adjustments, hard and a little smaller, and I can just, oh, no, I wanna click white. There we go. Yeah, click white, and then this can be used to touch up anything it selected that maybe it shouldn't have. So I'm getting all these little spots here, I'll get that. And it made a really nice mask of our trees. Like we can zoom in, and if we go super tight, we can see it's a little pixelated. But this is where that adjustments when we do our selection. You can go through this a few times and play with it, but if I'm just making it to look good on a screen, something like that, I'm happy with this, but this is where you can go in and really refine it, is in that selection tool. So I can grab my sky again and just drag it right in, drop it in place, and bring it over on the layers panel below. Then here I can use this tool to select and move it around right where I want it to be. So let's see. You want to make sure you bring it down far enough. If you're looking like right here, we want to make sure that we cover up those little bits of sky with our new sky. And right there, looks pretty good. And we can even see Andromeda sitting nicely between those trees. So that is how I use a color selection to select the shadows of the trees and create that layer mask to delete the sky behind them. Now, as I said at the beginning, these are just some of the techniques I use. This is my way of doing it. You can get really in depth with refining edges, doing like select and mask and all these different things, but it really is up to you to see what tools work best for what situations. The most complicated situations are ones like this image I'm about to show you. All right, so this is the image that's a little bit more complicated. So it has all of this white right here, which makes the sky replacement tool kind of freak out. It doesn't know what to do with the snow. And it also makes just doing that quick selection tool kind of hard. But then we have all these trees, which makes the quick selection tool impossible. So I did a mix of things with this. I used the quick selection tool on the mountain and got really detailed with it along the horizon here. And then for these trees, which, oh, whoa, look, yeah, pretty good. You can see I didn't clip off too many of the branches. Everything looks pretty nice. For these trees, I use that color selection method. So you kind of do a mix of both, but we can see I got a pretty nicely refined edge there. So it's really up to you guys to figure out which one of these tools you want to use, and you can use all of them and blend these options together. My favorite one is the sky replacement tool because it works so smoothly. And one image that I didn't expect would work out so well is this image here. I did not think the sky replacement tool would be able to handle this mountain and also these trees, but it did a great job even around these branches. Like it cut them out super nice, and it got really nice and detailed in this tree. So it's worth at least trying the sky selection or the sky replacement tool on even these more complicated images. So I hope that has been helpful. Again, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about replacing the sky. A lot of people get really into like the TK panel where you can choose different luminosities and do luminosity masking, and some people go into the channels, some people do all kinds of stuff, but I kind of like to keep things a little bit simpler, and this works for my brain, combining all of these different tools together to see what works best for what situation. So this video has been shot on the Canon R5. If you remember a video I put up a little bit ago, in fact it's this video right here, I compared the Olympus, I just like showing this Olympus off. I compared the Olympus with the 17mm lens versus the R5, and the Olympus looked way better, which doesn't make any sense. The R5 is supposed to be a much nicer camera. So for this video, what you've been watching is on the R5. I shot in 4K, HQ 4K, C-Log at 24 frames per second, manually set the white balance to 3800 Kelvin, and I think that's all the details. Oh, all eye. I set it to all eye quality too. So leave me a comment, let me know, did this look better than that comparison video I did? Because I really want to be able to get the most out of the R5 and not cripple it any more than it came crippled with the cripple hammer. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave your comments, leave your questions, leave your critiques of what you think could be done a little bit differently. I think a lot of what my channel is about is kind of the community behind things like the Move Shoot Move, behind the Canon and the Olympus, where we're all learning how to get the best quality out of these machines that we so dearly love. You can please subscribe for more videos. There's that bell notification, all that normal YouTuber stuff that helps me out with the algorithm and helps my little channel grow. If you want to learn more about what I do, you can follow me on Instagram. It is where I'm most active and I post the most things. If you're interested in picking up any of the gear, especially the Move Shoot Move, I have links down below. If you're interested in this rotator, you can use the code ALEX at checkout for 5% off. That would make me super duper happy. And I also am doing those one-on-one Zoom courses. And I would like a little bit of feedback on this one. Right now I'm offering a 2-night course for $250. Discount options are available, but I'm also thinking about offering more like just a 1-hour quick Zoom lesson, Zoom critique of your work, Zoom whatever you'd like, where we can talk about astrophotography. So let me know if just a 1 hour for maybe like $100 would be something you guys would be interested in, because I know money is definitely tough and we can only afford so much, especially with the pandemic and everything that's going on. So let me know if anyone would be interested in that. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I filled up my card. I filled up a 128 gig card because I was shooting in such high quality and I ramble so much. So I'm doing my outro on my phone. Yay for everybody. I think I was just about done, and I just was gonna say, my name is Alex McGregor. Thank you so much for watching. And that dorky part about when the stars are out, I'll see you there. This is why I don't have like more of my house showing, because I live in such a small little place. Like, there's my pantry, and there's my kitchen, and there's my laundry room, and here's my office. It's all right here. All right. Thank you guys. I'll catch you next time.